There's all sorts of cool stuff that go on in our mission. I mean, like you asked, we have one temple that's there that was built in the 80s. But the biggest part, I remember it was really cool. I finished about half my mission. I was in one area for 9 months, which was ridiculously long. You're normally in an area for about 4 months in our mission, depending on circumstances, but I was in there for 9 months. It was called Gilmer. It was out in East Texas. And so you have Dallas. It's kind of like there's two missions inside our mission. You have I guess you could say three, because you have English inside the city, and that's really strong as far as members are concerned. You have a good amount of stakes out there. Spanish, that's like another group. We had about 280 missionaries. If I last remembered, I think it was just over 100 or just under 100 were Spanish. And so that's constantly growing. I mean, in some areas I served my first area in Oak Cliff. It was a Spanish ward with about 800 people that it was just overflowing, and then you have a English branch, and so it was different. It was really diversified there. But the area that I was in for 9 months, that was called Gilmer, it was the stake out there, and that was actually where the church started in Texas. And so what happened was there were a lot of people that were, I think it was out in Tennessee and just the South, Georgia, and so what happened is they were getting taught by missionaries, and just from the very beginning of the church back in 1830, and so they started joining. And due to, I mean, you have different groups like the KKK and just other Southern radical groups that they were other extremist movements that they were just against the church, and so a lot of people were persecuted for that, and so they just left that place, hightailed it on out, and showed up they didn't really know they were in Texas, but they show up in Texas. And I mean, it looks just like the South if you've ever been there to Georgia, Florida, Alabama. And you have the whole southern greenery and the rolling hills, and the culture. It's the exact same as like being in the South. And so they show up there and they set up camp, and that was where the church started in Texas. And it was really cool. That was where it was called Kelsey. That's just right next to Gilmer. And I mean, you have lots of visits there. There's this, I remember I knew the family that they live in this, what used to be the old church building there. It was back in like the early 1800s. And you have different records of prophets and apostles that visited. And I think it was President Grant that visited there. And I think he promised them something about if they were righteous for a certain amount of time that they would get a temple there, and there's no temple there. So it was growing a lot at the time, and I mean, who knows if there will be one day, but that's just some cool background on that. But that stake, what happens is it stretches out into Oklahoma and Arkansas, and so we got to see a lot of that as well. It was a huge stake. I mean, it covered maybe it was 3-4 hours to drive around the whole thing. And so, or from one side to the other, and it was a really good mix of Spanish, English, and I mean, we had from really strong wards to branches to what we started was there used to be like a Spanish group that was just meeting together, and so they would still meet with the ward, but then they'd have sacrament on their own, and so it was just kind of like their own knit group, which is about 5 families. And so it was really diversified throughout the whole mission. We also had, I think there was Mandarin Chinese, that they spoke that out there in areas like Plano, some really nice areas, because it's Dallas in the city. That's a real corporate area. But you have the city is one side, and then Dallas East, which is maybe 3 hours away from the mission home. That's another, where you have 80-70 missionaries out there, and it's really cool. It's really different cultures. You have the city culture, you have the whole city Spanish, and then you have the whole country, where it's Hicks, redneck, country love, Southern hospitality, the whole idea. It was so fantastic being able to serve in both parts. It was like I had 2 different missions, and so I really enjoyed that.